Good evening. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and welcome to Vampire Reviews. I would say happy Halloween, but every day is Halloween in my lair, so just be happy and spooky. Earlier this year, we lost one of the great masterminds of horror. George Romero is most famous for his Living Dead films, which he spawned in 1968 with Night of the Living Dead. As we've discussed previously, he was inspired by the vampires in I Am Legend and its film adaptation The Last Man on Earth to create his Living Dead. They in turn inspired decades of zombie lore and imagery, and Romero has since been crowned the father of the zombie genre, godfather of the dead. Ugh, zombies. But Romero did write and direct a vampire film, just one, in 1978. But when asked which of his many films was his favorite, this is the one he always claimed, despite how it was often lost in the shadows among his body of work. Bodies of work? Work of bodies? Bodies. This is Martin. And Martin is a brooding, pretty teenage vampire. Or is he? He's a mysterious, murderous, blood-drinking creature of the night, that's for sure. The film opens with him killing a woman on a train, and the old cousin he's taking this train to go live with certainly thinks Martin's a legitimately supernatural vampire. But is he actually a member of the immortal undead, or just a human serial killer? The beauty of this film is that you truly never can know for sure one way or the other. Though he looks 17, Martin says he's 84 years old, and he has dreams and visions of his past in oldie times. But are they real memories, or is it all in his mind?
I've been told you are imbecile. Can you speak?
He's not neurotypical, but is that a cause of his delusions of vampire grandeur, or merely an unrelated part of his actual personal vampire physiology? He moves in with Colonel Sanders here, his cousin Cuda, who promises to save Martin's soul and then destroy him. Martin is either on board with this or doesn't believe it's actually possible. He explains later that he used to long for an end to his existence, but not so much at this point in his life. Though perhaps he simply wants the situation taken out of his hands? A certain freedom comes with having someone else make your decisions for you, which is horribly ironic and bleak, but George Romero didn't make monster films as a form of social commentary to make you feel good. Cuda believes his family is cursed, and that every once in a while a child is born to be a vampire. He recounts past vampires in the family, and he regrets not killing them as children before they grew up to become murderers. Martin often compares what it's like to be a real vampire to how things are in the movies.
There isn't any magic! There isn't any magic! It's just a sickness. It isn't magic.
The lack of magic makes a case for the interpretation that his vampiric activity is attributed to his neurodivergency. But if he really is an 84-year-old vampire, then there has to be some magic. The tone of the film is decidedly unmagical, though. It's long and slow and dreary, and this is the shortcut. There was a 2-hour 45-minute cut that's been lost to the ages. It's set in a deteriorating steel town, full of unhappy people, representing the decay of the American dream. After the boom of the 1950s glory days faded, the new generation of young people emerging into adulthood that was the very start of Generation X are floundering, disillusioned, and disconnected. Real life has sucked away the fantasy of prosperity for these people, much like a vampire so cruelly robs life from the young and beautiful. There is no magic in what the country has become, and perhaps there never was. Was the American dream only ever a delusion? Like Martin's vampirism might be? But whether he's a real vampire or not, Martin is as much a victim as the loneliness and isolation that permeate the landscape as everyone else. He is awkward and silent, unwilling or afraid to talk most of the time, unable to express himself, stunted, hitting a wall, like the country around him. He laments that being a vampire is not like the movies in one way in particular.
And that's another thing about those movies. Vampires always have ladies. Sometimes lots of ladies. Well, that's wrong, too.
He usually chooses beautiful women as his victims, and after he drugs them, he rapes them before cutting them with a razor blade to drink their blood. But unlike the sort of psychosexual serial killer you can imagine having a fetish for unconscious women, Martin doesn't actually prefer this. He longs for a woman who will have sex with him willingly. When he finally meets one, though, it's not like what he imagined. She is clinically depressed and eventually commits suicide. Her affair with Martin is one last attempt to feel alive before her illness claims her.
Boy, do I wish what you have is catching.
Some people think it is catching. In the movies, it's catching.
Give it to me. Please.
We don't really know if she knows he's a vampire or is completely in the dark and is referring to his neurodivergency and is under the misconception that his mind is simpler and he has some kind of innocent mental freedom. But either way, they are two damaged people trying to find fulfillment together and failing. Martin is so desperate for connection and understanding that he gets in the habit of calling a late-night radio host and telling him and all his listeners all about the murders he commits and his life as a vampire. The DJ doesn't take him seriously and considers Martin's stories just sensationalist ratings boosters. He even laughs at him. But even though Martin isn't getting the understanding he craves, he keeps calling, just like the old people who cling to their town even as it is dying around them. Kuda's granddaughter and her boyfriend are both desperate to escape for greener pastures, but the film implies they won't find any happiness elsewhere either. Their relationship is hostile and unhealthy, and she even admits as she's leaving that she won't end up with her boyfriend, she just needs him as a stepping stone because she's that desperate.
You'll forget about me.
No, I won't. Why do you think I forget?
People always go away so they can forget where they were.
And Martin's not wrong. No one is happy. Everyone is settling for what they think is the best they can get, or the most they deserve. Each of these people are so isolated in their bubbles of despair that once they float away, there's no hope for reconnection, caught in the in-between. And Martin works as a delivery boy for his cousin, a literal go-between, a broken link. Kuda disparages the change around him. He clings to the old ways. He believes in the family curse with religious zealotry, but even after Martin proves to him that crosses and garlic don't work, Kuda continues to use the symbols, refusing to change his ways. When his granddaughter's boyfriend complains about the lack of work in their dying town, Kuda insists it's not true. The local priest comes for dinner. That actor playing the priest there is George Romero, by the way. Kuda complains about the previous priest.
Father Corelli is younger than I am. He asked to leave. He left, like the rest of them. They think this town is finished.
No, he has cancer.
Kuda is proven wrong over and over again, but refuses to see the light, and never will. Just like a stereotypical vampire can never see the light of day. The film ends with Kuda slaying Martin, and this is incredibly ironic because he does it as punishment for the death of the one person Martin didn't actually kill. But Kuda's ending is even more tragic than Martin's. Once more, Kuda is wrong. Even after he's lost his granddaughter and everything else he cares about is slipping away, he will never see or accept how wrong he is. In dying, Martin gets the release he wanted on some level, but Kuda is trapped in his small, closed mind. So tragic. I mean, can you imagine living in an era where you can show a person over and over again why their beliefs are wrong, both on a moral level and literally inaccurate, but they refuse to change? What must that political climate be like to endure? Martin is ironically the opposite of Kuda in this sense. He progresses with new technology, using his needles to make killing easier than it was in the old days, finding a compatible garage door opener to break into a house. His newly acquired phone and radio give him means to at least try to connect to people in a way that was never available in his past if he really is 84 years old. But as impressive as this adaptive ability is for him then as someone even older than Kuda, it ultimately fails. There is no solution or hope at the end. Society is doomed. Romero's favorite film. We also see here in The Vampire an allegory for drug addiction. When Martin goes too long without blood, he starts to get the shakes and becomes desperate for his next fix. Having a real girlfriend for the first time distracts him from his murderous adventures, but doesn't cure him of the addiction. Even if it were a healthy, happy relationship, it probably wouldn't, because addiction doesn't work that way. He waits too long to kill again, and he gets sloppy. We witness his downward spiral. He goes from killing glamorous women on exciting train rides to snatching homeless men in filthy alleys and almost getting caught. The comparison to the deterioration drugs cause is hammered home when, in his flight from the police, he leads them right into the middle of an actual drug deal that results in a shootout, and everyone dies. The razor blades Martin uses to draw his victim's blood also bring to mind self-harm cutting, especially when his girlfriend kills herself by slitting her wrists in the bathtub. Though, despite common misconceptions, self-injury typically isn't suicidal. Cutters draw their own blood to experience a sense of release that can be as addictive as drugs, and just as temporary. The release fades, and the tension and pressure within build again, worse and worse. Meanwhile, the America around them is crashing from its post-World War II high into this desperate, shaky era of bleak despair. As the image of a vampire, Martin is a pretty teenager. But unlike the teenage vampires to come in following years, he is not cool, nor is he seductive or alluring like the more mature vampire stereotypes that came before. He's mysterious, but it's awkward social anxiety, not suave or rebellious. He's twitchy and dull, with nothing to say or contribute. He just watches and is creepy. And the result is much more psychologically disturbing and unsettling than it is scary in the traditional horror sense. It makes you uncomfortable. And if there is one thing George Romero loved to do, a true master, even if he did like zombies. This film is beloved by critics and considered one of Romero's most artistic, but that made it too different from his famous zombie masterpieces, and it didn't catch fire with audiences. It was super low budget, so it didn't flop or anything, but only serious horror fans seem to remember it. But even though it's 4 decades old, it feels poignantly relevant today. The film's ending is bleak. Unlike Romero's apocalypse movies that began as a reaction to the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement in Night of the Living Dead, the world in Martin isn't ending, but it's doomed all the same. And in a way, the realistic aspect of that can be a lot more frightening. But the film doesn't have to be a prophecy. It could be a cautionary tale. If we as a culture could just step out of the dark, abandon our bubbles, open our minds, communicate, progress, and change. I am the Maven of the Eventide, and the grave may have claimed you, George Romero, but your art reaches beyond it more now than ever. Living dead indeed. No, but really, happy Halloween. And thank you to all my Patreon patrons. I could not make this show without your funding and support. So, this is for you. As always, I love you. Please like my video, subscribe to my channel, leave me comments, talk about George Romero, honor his memory. Good night.